There's a very specific kind of pain that hits when you finally talk about the emotional abuse that you lived through and the person across from you doesn't see it. Not because they're cruel or they're screaming at you, but because they look like you're describing something small, like it's a misunderstanding, like it's just one of those things that people are supposed to get over. And your body knows immediately that something went wrong. Your chest drops, your throat tightens, your words start losing weight while they're still coming out of your mouth. You feel that internal pullback that says you misjudged this moment, that you shouldn't have said anything and you gave too much. You didn't bring this up to be dramatic, to be rescued, or for attention. You brought it up because you were trying to name something that quietly rewired you. Something that took months, years off of your life and rearranged how you think, how you trust, how you speak, and how you stay. And when they don't recognize the abuse, it doesn't feel like disagreement. It feels like your reality slipping sideways, like you stepped forward with something fragile and it landed nowhere. Like you exposed something real and now you're standing there alone with it. Sometimes people will minimize it or other people will intellectualize it. And sometimes they even make a joke. Things will be said like, that sounds unhealthy, or it takes two, or everyone has relationship issues. And even if they don't mean to mock you, your nervous system hears the same message it heard before. This is not serious. You're overreacting. You should have handled this better. That's when you shut down, you over-explain, or you start defending your pain. Or even worse, you go to war with yourself later, replaying the relationship, wondering if you made it up, wondering if you're being unfair or if leaving was a mistake. This episode is for the woman who walked away from emotional abuse and felt more disoriented afterwards trying to explain it to someone who didn't understand it. Not because you need everyone to agree with you, but because being dismissed doesn't hurt. It reopens wounds like you're still trying to close it. When someone doesn't recognize your abuse, the pain isn't about them being wrong. It's about what activates you. You've already spent years being told you were overreacting, misreading things, or trying to make problems where they didn't exist. You already lived inside a dynamic where your feelings were questioned and where your reality was bent just enough to keep you off balance. So when you finally leave and decide to try to explain it, you're not just sharing a story. You're testing whether it's safe to trust your own perception again. When the response doesn't match the weight of what you lived, your system doesn't experience that as neutral, it experiences it as a threat. That's why your confidence drops so fast and why you suddenly want to take it back to soften it or to reframe it into something smaller. Your body learned that being misunderstood was dangerous. Dismissal doesn't just hurt emotionally, it scrambles orientation. It pulls you back into the same self-questioning loop that you worked so hard to get out of. When someone minimizes emotional abuse, most women don't argue, they turn inward. Some will shut down completely, they stop sharing, they change the subject, and they make a mental note to never bring it up again. Others will go into defense mode. They add details, give examples, try to help it make sense for the other person. They explain tone, patterns, impact. They start sounding like they're on trial for something that they've already survived. Others will over-explain. They walk the person step by step through moments that were really painful just to see if it'll click. All of these responses are trauma responses. Your nervous system learned that misunderstanding led to consequences, so it scans for the fastest way to regain stability: silence, defense, and explanation. The problem is that all three cost you something. Silence erases you, defense drains you, explanation keeps you tied to needing approval. And afterward, you're left feeling worse than before you spoke, not because you shared, but because you shared with someone who wasn't safe enough to hold it. And this is where you start turning against yourself. When someone dismisses emotional abuse, most women don't stay angry at them, they go to war with themselves. You replay what you said, you wonder if you used the wrong words, you ask yourself if you made it sound worse than it was, so you start trimming the edges off your own experience to make it more acceptable. You don't do this because you're insecure, you do this because emotional abuse trained you to doubt your perception in order to survive the relationship. Self-doubt wasn't a flaw, it was a coping mechanism. So when dismissal happens later, your nervous system doesn't interpret it as one person's limitation. It interprets it as confirmation of your old injury. This is why you can feel grounded for weeks and then spiral after one conversation. It's not regression. It is a fault line that gets stepped on. The pain isn't about being believed by everybody. It's about trying to rebuild your internal authority after years of it being undermined. There is a very good reason why it's so hard to explain to somebody who hasn't lived through emotional abuse, because it doesn't leave the obvious markers. There's no single moment that you can point to that explains everything. It's patterns, the tone shifts, the control disguised as concern, punishment disguised as distance. You didn't live in fear of explosions, you lived in fear of withdrawal, confusion, and emotional consequences that you couldn't predict. That kind of harm is hard to summarize. So when someone looks at it through a simple lens and doesn't see the damage, it doesn't just feel invalidating, it feels like being asked to compress years of erosion into a small soundbite. And when you can't, you blame yourself. The truth is, emotional abuse can only make sense when you understand how it changes a nervous system over time. If somebody hasn't learned to see that, they will default to minimizing it. It doesn't mean that your experience was small, it just means that their capacity or their lens of this is. What most people don't understand is that being dismissed after emotional abuse often hurts more than the abuse itself, not because the original harm was small, but because of where you are when the dismissal happens. You're no longer inside of the relationship trying to hide it. You're outside of it, finally attempting to make sense of something that once kept you disoriented. You are trying to integrate your reality, rebuild trust in your perception, and name what happened without collapsing back into confusion. So when someone minimizes the experience, it doesn't feel like disagreement. It feels like having the ground pulled out from under you again. The pain isn't about needing approval. It's about the fact that emotional abuse works by slowly destabilizing your sense of reality, training you to question yourself so the relationship can continue. So when someone later on doubts your experience, your nervous system doesn't have a neutral response to it. It experiences it as confirmation of the original injury. And your body reacts before your mind can intervene. You find yourself mentally replaying the events, rechecking details, wondering if you overstated, wondering if you misunderstood what you lived through. That internal spiral is not weakness. It's the residue of a system that required self-doubt in order to endure the pain. And what makes this more harmful for you is you are sharing from a place of honesty, transparency, and a clear head, not chaos. You are no longer asking somebody to rescue you. You're trying to anchor yourself in your truth. When the moment is questioned, it feels like it's being erased in the exact space where you're trying to fully exist again. There's a big difference between sharing with someone who is safe and someone who's not, and this is why that matters. Not everybody is entitled to your story, and that has nothing to do with bitterness or closing yourself off. People do not need you to persuade them. They do not require a detailed explanation before they can stay present. They do not interrogate your memory, compare your experience to something worse, or subtly reframe what you went through so it fits inside of their comfort zone. They can listen without urgency. They can sit with discomfort without trying to tidy it up. Unsafe people are not always obvious. Many of them sound thoughtful. They ask questions. They present alternative perspectives. They may even believe they are helping. The problem here is not intent, it's capacity. When somebody needs your experience to make sense to them before they can respect it, they are prioritizing their worldview over your reality. That imbalance is not safe. Your body often recognizes this before your mind does. You might leave the conversation feeling unsettled, second-guessing yourself, or mentally rehearsing what you should have said differently. These sensations matter. Your body is telling you a story. So sharing is not about being believed by everyone. It's about choosing containers that do not require you to shrink, justify, or translate your lived experience in order for it to be taken seriously. I see this often with the women I work with inside of the RRR membership. They finally leave, they get the distance in between, and they start putting language to what happened to them. So when they try to share it with someone else close to them, a friend, a family member, a new partner, someone they assume would be safe, they're not asking for advice or solutions, and they're not asking for agreement. They are just asking for space to be held, and instead, they often get confusion, logic, minimization, a subtle tone shift that says, I don't see what you're seeing. I watched a client recently describe years of emotional control to a friend who responded with, but he never hit you, right? As if that single question erased her experience. It's hard because you nod and you agree in that moment because that is the truth. It was emotional abuse. There was no physical harm. But later she shared with me that she felt really stupid for bringing it up. Like only physical abuse is the part that matters, and she felt quite angry. Because after that exchange, she didn't just stop sharing with that friend, she stopped trusting her own memory, which was something she was really working hard to do. She was replaying moments of the relationship with me, trying to figure out where she had gone wrong again, even though she knew she didn't have to justify why she left. Not because she necessarily believed she was incorrect, but because she had been trained to doubt herself in an abusive marriage, her reality was not affirmed. This is why it's not your job to convince people, because every time you try, you're handing them authority over your own experience. Every time they don't meet you, you pay for it internally. The women who heal aren't the ones who are trying to find the perfect words. They're the ones who learn when not to speak, who learn to protect their story instead of offering it to somebody who asks, who learn that safety isn't about being believed by everyone, it's just about not betraying yourself in the process. Self-safety is something that we actively work on inside of the RRR membership, but safety with others is not established by disclosure, it's established by response. You do not need to tell the whole story to know whether someone can hold it or not. You learn that by observing how they respond to small, ordinary moments. You notice what happens when you say no, when you express a preference, when you name a boundary without explaining it. You can pay attention to whether your limits are being respected or negotiated, and whether your words are being received or challenged. Safe people do not push for intimacy faster than trust can support. They do not pressure you for context or emotional access you have not offered. You allow closeness to build naturally without extracting information as proof. Unsafe people are going to seek depth prematurely. They don't just want to hear about the breakup, they want to hear about all of the details and how that made you feel and what exactly went on. That urgency is not curiosity, it's actually entitlement. Testing safety means letting someone earn proximity through consistency rather than rewarding them with vulnerability up front. It means trusting that you are allowed to remain vague, paused, and waiting. Anyone who makes you feel like you owe them something in your story is showing you that they have not earned that yet. When someone minimizes your experience, your instinct is often to go back into explanation, to clarify, to elaborate, to find better wording so they can finally understand and you feel settled again. That impulse comes from old conditioning. Emotionally abusive relationships, explanation was often a survival tool. If you could just say it the right way, maybe things would stabilize. Rebuilding self-trust requires interrupting that reflex. Instead of asking whether someone understands, you begin to ask whether you believe yourself. You return to what you felt when it was happening. The anxiety that didn't make sense at the time, the confusion that lingered even after conversations, the way your body responded long before your mind caught up. Those signals are not abstract, they are data. Self-trust will grow when you stop outsourcing your reality. That sometimes means allowing people to misunderstand you. It sometimes means leaving the conversation unfinished. It often means choosing not to defend your experience at all. Each time you prioritize your internal knowing over external approval, you repaired the exact place emotional abuse was disrupted. Healing does not come from crafting the perfect explanation or finding the right audience. It comes from building a life where your reality does not need constant translation. It comes from choosing relationships where your body can stay relaxed instead of braced, where your experience is met with steadiness rather than skepticism. Over time, your nervous system learns that safety no longer depends on being agreeable or understood. Emotional abuse taught you that survival required adaptability and restraint. Healing teaches you that safety now comes from self-reference, from listening to your internal signals, from honoring when something feels off without needing to justify it. You are not broken for reacting strongly to dismissal. Your nervous system is protecting something that once cost you dearly to lose. You no longer need to convince anyone. You need to stay aligned with yourself. Here's what I want you to walk away with today. You do not owe anyone a perfectly packaged explanation of what you lived through. You do not need to convince people what was real, serious, or damaging enough to count. The moment you find yourself rehearsing, justifying, or editing your truth so it'll land better, you are back inside of a dynamic where your reality depends on somebody else's comfort. That is not healing. That is survival, muscle, memory. The work now is not learning how to explain emotional abuse more clearly. The work is learning how to stay rooted in yourself when someone doesn't get it. Learning how to notice the internal pull to defend, then choosing not to follow it. Learning to walk away from conversations that leave you smaller, shakier, or doubting what you already know. You don't need more validation. You need environments where your system can settle instead of brace. You need relationships where your experience is met with steadiness, not analysis. You need to stop reopening wounds in rooms that were never meant to hold them. Your healing does not depend on being believed by everyone. It depends on you no longer abandoning yourself when disbelief shows up. The more you anchor there, the quieter the noise will get. Not because people change, but because the reactions stop running your nervous system. That's when you know you're no longer negotiating your reality and when you actually set yourself free. If this episode cracks something open in you, good. That means you're not numbing it away anymore. Share this episode with another woman who's shrinking her story because people don't want to hear it. Follow so you don't miss the next one. And if you want support rebuilding trust in yourself after emotional abuse, this is the work we do inside of the Reinvent, Rebuild, and Redeem membership. Daily coaching, support, love, and feedback for you to understand understand and unpack what happened to you in a community of safe women who are on their healing journey from abuse as well. We have 2 live calls every single month and a private Telegram channel for message support. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to stop abandoning yourself.